'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello and welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast. My name is Rich Natoli. I'm the host of this show, and today we're joined by a guy that I have been fortunate enough to go fishing with a couple of times and very, very quickly realized I want to be like him. And I'm following him around all on social media, and he is also a member of the Salt Strong Insider Club. So I want you guys all to welcome onto the stream or onto the podcast right now, Bob Lombardi. Bob, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm serious. I have had the blessing to be able to talk with a lot of outstanding fishermen through the podcast and previous live stream, and a lot of them are professional fishermen. You know, they make their living on the water. They make their living with the rod and reel and getting their clients onto fish. And I get to fish with them, and you know, it's you realize that some of these guys are just, man, I'm just so fortunate to have met them. There are two or three actually that I have fished with that aren't professional fishermen that I realized are among the best anglers I have ever crossed paths with. They've got Frank Mahalik, who is just amazing with tog fishing. Got George Bucci, who is a surf caster, who you and I both went fishing with a couple of weeks ago, and I got to see him from shore down in Virginia just slaying while everyone else around was doing well. And it was ridiculous watching him. Yeah. And then I've seen you fishing.
Surf fishing is a science all in and of itself.
Yeah, and he's got that mentality. Like he sees things I think that we don't see. You know, you and I are fishing from kayaks most of the time. Yeah. And then I've been following you a lot on not only on Salt Strong, but on social media, on Facebook. And I've had the opportunity to fish with you. And even on the day where we didn't catch anything, when we were looking for bull reds, there is a focus in your eyes that I want to emulate when I'm out on the water. And I'm really glad that you could come on today to talk about your adventures fishing. I don't even think this is a bold statement, pretty much fishing the entire Chesapeake Bay in the major areas. And now you're just kind of filling in the gaps. Is that the way to look at it?
Yeah, I think, like most of us started fishing with my father years ago. And that was where my love began, you know, when stripers were being caught by the hundreds on hundreds of boats, and, you know, which led to the moratorium years and all that, and suffering through all of that. And so I pretty much fished, from the up to the Susquehanna, all the way down to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel at some time or another. Last few years, really the last 12 years or so, it's been on a kayak. And the last 4 to 5 years, I've really been focused on really super skinny water down on the Eastern Shore, because I think it's a perfect kayak opportunity. And these are isolated locations, and there's plenty of fish and not a lot of fishermen. There's not little pressure. There's no pressure, no fishing pressure whatsoever. And it's an endless opportunity to find fish.
I will echo that. I love going to the places where there aren't a lot of people, and I will spend in the incredibly overpopulated summer areas of New Jersey, as an example. I will spend hours looking for that one spot where people don't go or can't go, just to find that zero pressure area. And when you find it, it's like it's like utopia just opened up right in front of you, and it's all yours.
Yeah. What if you find that one spot, but you find an endless number of those spots?
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and the Eastern Shore definitely has a lot of those areas. So before we came on to record this, Bob and I were talking about a trip that I had yesterday where we were kind of limited to where we could go, and it was not where we wanted to go. And the areas that Bob was helping me with the pre-trip planning before, and we were texting back and forth, and He was zeroing in on areas that were very similar to what I was looking for. They were in the middle of nowhere. There were a lot of marshlands. There were a lot of creeks that you just know are unexplored. And it would have been nice to have been able to get down there to check out one of those and send back to you, hey, I just found a new hotspot for you to check out next time you get down there. But we'll have to put that off for another week. I'm thinking maybe September will be the month that I get down into that area and can hopefully bring back some intel to help you out on your next trip over to the Eastern Shore. So,
well, the one thing I found is that the further south you go, the better it gets.
Yes.
And just generally speaking, as far as fishing pressure and isolation, and especially down in Virginia, there's so much water, so much shoreline, so many creeks, so many launch points where Virginia, particularly Accomack County, has done an awesome job with their ramps and water access. Wow, it's overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, and I'll say it totally changes in the type of topography that you have once you get to that southern Maryland, Virginia border. Yeah. When you're looking in the I guess it's technically the middle Chesapeake, where you're talking around the Annapolis Bridge, and a little bit south and a little bit north, you don't have a lot of those marshy vertical grass shorelines. There are some, but it's not the predominant thing. But once you start getting further south, it starts to take over, and it starts to, in places, it starts to look like a South Carolina backwaters, where you could just get lost, and that's what that's where I feel at home. That's where I
and exactly, and I feel exactly the same way. It was funny. I spent yesterday morning, if you know Kayak Kevin Whiteley,
yes,
from Virginia,
yep,
famous fisherman in Virginia, just incredible fisherman of all species. It doesn't matter. Well, he did a tour of the Chesapeake Bay a number of years ago, and he made a video out of it. And I watched it specifically to observe the topography coming up the eastern side of the Chesapeake Bay from south to north, and how it changed over time. From how we went from grasses and marshes and flats and all these things that we love and we look for, to basically cliff sides rather than marshlands. And that really is indicative of the Chesapeake Bay and its unique properties as an estuary. There's just so much, and there's so many different ways to fish it, and so many places that are largely still unexplored to the south.
It's amazing. It's an area that I plan to spend a lot more time fishing. My wife and I have already talked about in a few years moving further south, and we're looking at along the Chesapeake, and we're looking Eastern Shore. And
Nice.
Part of it is because I'm absolutely hopelessly addicted to fishing, and the salt water and the brackish water is really what I love fishing. And being close to water doesn't hurt, And Bob, she said, I got to tell you that the worst thing she said is, we moved down there, we're going to have to get a boat. And a couple
no, we can't do that.
Yeah, and a couple more kayaks. So I said, man, that hurts, but okay.
Yeah, it's funny. I spoke to a group in Delaware a few nights ago, and one of the first things I said to them was that my theory on kayak fishing is that if the water's over 4 feet deep, it's too deep. So if I get anywhere that's maybe 6 at the most, if I got really current on a point. Other than that, I'm targeting 4 feet, 2 to 4 seems to be the zone in which I probably catch 95% of my fish.
That's interesting.
95%.
Yeah, and that's the battle for me, because I'm used to fishing primarily New Jersey waters, and 2 to 4 feet we typically don't even look at. We're looking at the drops down to 8 to 20, even to 30. So I'm very comfortable fishing those, and it's difficult for me to say I need to stick in the shallows. And I'll tell you what, though, Bob, yesterday you would have been proud. We pounded. We absolutely carpet bombed the shallows. So we were up in the 2 to 4 for much of it. There was so much bait. It was just impossible to get through the bait. I think there were shad in there. There were definitely there were adult bunker, believe it or not,
Really?
Yes, which was a
Nice.
big shock. There were a lot of peanuts. There was glass minnows spearing. It was crazy. There was so much bait in the water that my fish finder was just and not only, you didn't even need the fish finder, you could just see it going under you.
Yeah.
It was just clouds all day. It was just a big cloud underneath you.
That's got to be a completely different mindset for you, because you guys are used to like 8 to 20 deeper, lots of current flow, being really close to the ocean, where we don't get a lot of ocean effect here in the bay, at least, up in the grasses and things. So you guys are used to fishing vertically.
Yes.
Where we're fishing horizontally, we're casting and fan casting and bank trolling and hitting points and things like that. So yeah, it's really it's a complete change. It's a different mindset altogether. You're always looking for deeper water. I'm always looking for more shallow water.
Right. And I'll tell you what, the Chesapeake is a great example of an area where you have all of it. Right.
Yes.
So we did get to the point where I was suffering from the heat after, I think, 6 hours. I was like, I just got to take a break here from just the continuous casting. So I backed off and I fished an underwater point with a ledge down to around 25 feet. And I just pulled out the slow pitch rod and was vertical jigging. But I did find something there that a lot of people I think would say weren't there in the area that I was fishing. I caught a flounder. I caught a flounder in a river all the way up in the middle bay. And it was because I was vertical jigging. So you never know what's there also. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the Chesapeake. You pretty well have the shot at almost anything at any area of that, in that same spot.
Yeah.
I've caught, not the same spot, but the same area, that I could pedal in one day.
Yep.
I've caught in this area, I've caught Spanish mackerel, striped bass, white perch, croaker, flounder, which is what I caught yesterday. What else? Did I say specks? The reds are there. There's pretty much everything in that area, and you don't get that in a lot of places that I typically fish. So I think it's great. So one of the things that I do want to talk about in this is, as we start rolling into September, what species are you looking for and what areas are you going to? But before we go there, I think maybe we end on that. I want to just know if you could pick 3 places at any time of the year to go fishing on the Chesapeake. Where are those areas? You don't have to give spots, obviously, but what general areas are you going and what are you targeting?
I think my number one, which is a place that I've had a tremendous amount of success. In fact, my 2 personal best speckled trout catches, 28 and 29 inches, come from the Crisfield area.
Okay. That's
so
a great area.
I love the Crisfield area. I've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours fishing the Crisfield area, and probably know it as well as anything in regard to fishing in areas. So Crisfield would probably be my number one go-to, particularly in the springtime. I love it when the water begins to warm up a little bit, up around 50 degrees or so, and those grasses start to emerge, and it just turns on. It just turns on. I think that's another place that I would like would probably be just around Hoopers. There's lots of current flow, Hoopers Island.
Yep.
That can be very, very good too. Like we said, there's lots of current dropping out of there. There's a couple boat ramps there that have been some locations that have been very productive for me. And then down in Virginia, there's a whole series of launches just below the Maryland-Virginia line that I go to. And really, you just take your pick. Just drop in there and, just follow a shoreline. I started something last year that turned out to be pretty interesting as far as breaking down areas. I would take 2 days and I would spend 2 days in Virginia, and I'd stay overnight, and I'd launch from a place that I'd never launched before. And the first day, I would just make nothing but left-hand turns.
Huh.
And I would just stay on the shoreline for as long, for wherever it took me. And then I would chart it out, mark it out and all that. And the next day I come back, I do make nothing but right-hand turns. I'd follow the right-hand shoreline. So by the time I was done in those 2 days, I pretty much had it figured out. So there's probably a place down there that I really love. It's called Harborton. And that's a pretty popular area. That's one of the more popular ones there. I would say if anyone has fished Eastern Shore of Virginia, you know about Harborton, but there's also probably another 6 or 7 that are more remote and can be just as productive.
So Harborton, that's on a pretty significant creek system, right?
Yeah, that's a big creek.
Yeah.
So that's a big creek.
And I noticed,
but I haven't spent a lot of time up in that creek. Basically, that's mostly a grass flat. Once you get out off the ramp about a mile, it starts this enormous grass flat that extends the rest of the length of the creek, and then extends out into the bay, which takes you to a series of broken islands with lots of sharp points and lots of current. It's just got lots of positive elements.
It's interesting. I hear a lot of people say the way that you fish in the mid-Atlantic is not anywhere near the way that you fish in the South and vice versa. But what you're really describing are your 3 spots all set up very similar to quote unquote Southern fishing. You're talking
Absolutely.
flats, you're talking grass, you're fishing potholes, you're fishing the same species with at least the specks and the reds, which are both possible in that area. Not possible, they're there. Those are 2 of the target species in the area. Of course, in the Chesapeake, you add in the striped bass and replace the snook with that. But
right.
It's very similar. I think it's interesting. You picked out 3 areas that are just, as you said, you want 2 to 4 feet, and you are just in the middle of 2 to 4 feet and grass and marshes in those areas. So those look great.
If I dropped you out of a plane with a kayak and I dropped you in some of these locations and told you were in North Carolina, you wouldn't know the difference.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I will say, for full disclosure, we were hoping to get down to the Deal Crisfield area yesterday. We weren't able to make that drive in a single day down and back. So that's what we were looking for.
Yeah, Crisfield's about my limit. That's about where I'll go down for a single day. If I'm going into Virginia, I'm going to find I know where all the cheap motels are. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I'm going to get a good lock for my kayak so I can start doing that. I'm good with the cheap hotel. Drive down and get a few hours of sleep and then hit the water. I'm going to have to do more of that. Now, let me ask you. You fished the Bay Bridge and tunnel. How was that for you? Did you like that? Is that because that is not what you're saying is your wheelhouse or where you prefer to be fishing?
It's not my wheelhouse, because the best part of the Bay Bridge tunnel is the first island coming out of Virginia.
Yeah.
And that's not something that I have access to very easily. So my experience is coming out of the Wise boat ramp and Chesapeake, fishing the concrete ships at Chesapeake State Park, which is just a whole nother level of joy. It's just so much fun. But anyway, so really what I have had access to on a number of occasions is coming out of Wise, which is the very last boat ramp on the Eastern Shore.
Yep. Right in that cut.
Right in the cut. Yep. Right before you got the ocean on the left and the bay on the right. And you talk about current flowing through that cut there is unbelievable at times. So I fished that a good bit. I fished both the ocean side and the bay side. I had some good success. I caught a lot of flounder, some really nice flounder, low 20s. Caught a bunch of those and some trout and, some rockfish, stripers. I had not, I caught some sort of drum one time under that first span, but I don't know what, it was kind of a gray. It kind of looked like a black drum, but didn't have stripes because the juveniles have stripes, and as they get older, they go dark. This one was all dark, and it wasn't a red, so it was just, I don't know, some weird drum sort of thing.
Mystery
Whatever.
fish.
Yeah, mystery fish. I caught spade fish
Yep.
at the concrete ships. A lot of hardhead croakers, spot. Lots of those things over the years. But that's a fun fishery. But as far as getting out there and going, hardcore to the bridge, I'm not above doing that. But I'd like to have somebody take me out there first and show me the ropes before I go, barreling 3 miles out into the main stem of the bay and all that current.
Yeah, I'm okay with current, but there are certain places that are a lot different. I think you need to pick your days in an area like that. I mean, the current is vicious in there at times. And then at other times, I've seen people. One of my favorite things, Bob, is when I would leave to go home from a trip for down to North Carolina. So I'm down in the Outer Banks fishing. And one of my favorite things is when the bridge gets totally backed up and it's stopped. Because I can then just kind of watch the fishermen right next to me at the next span over fishing. And there have been days where there are guys standing on their kayaks, just all, right up against the pilings, vertical jigging for fish. And then there are days where you just see the boats flying through there at about 5 knots. And you wouldn't know anything about those days. If you didn't see that, you'd think they were the same day. No wind,
right.
So there are certain times where I wouldn't want to be out there in a kayak. I wouldn't want to be fighting those currents because you wouldn't be able to. You just kind of have to go across the current and then come up along the shoreline a couple miles to get back to your launch. But
that's where that local knowledge is so important.
Yeah.
We can sit here and we can look at maps and Google Earth and Navionics and all the other, tools that we have at our disposal, including Fish Strong tools that they've given us. But it's nothing like being there, nothing like experiencing it and, learning on the water.
Yeah, I agree. So one thing that I want to make sure that we touch on is when this comes out, it's going to be nearly September, and people have options. September, as you said before we came on, September is when things change over from the tough part of August is tough. I mean, August is tough pretty much everywhere because of the heat and everything, but you start to turn a corner and transition into September. So I want to go like the same type of question. Where's the one place that you want to go on the Chesapeake in September, and what are you going to be targeting?
I think it goes back to my answer to the other question, what are your 3 favorite locations? The target's going to be speckled trout.
Yep.
Because what I find is if I target speckled trout, what I end up doing is catching some speckled trout, but I also catch a lot of stripers, and I do catch redfish as well. Not as many redfish as I would like. I'm hoping to remedy some of that this fall, starting this week.
Yeah,
we're scouting some new water Wednesday and Thursday, so I'm hoping to change that a little bit. But yeah, the target is trout. The prize of prize is the reds, and the rockfish are fun, but for me they're kind of a bycatch at this point because they're everywhere. They're everywhere. So I think it's just a matter of focusing on a target, and then adjusting off of that. I mean, if I'm on a beautiful grass flat and I fish the crap out of it and I don't find any trout, and then I start hitting the points. On the points, I'm going to find stripers and chances are fairly good, depending on where I am. I might find a redfish or two.
Right. Man, I wish I had found that yesterday. We fished these points, and man, we weren't. It was a brutal day. It was perch, and it was like I said, that flounder and croakers all over the place. But we,
Croaker, wow.
yeah, I didn't expect to catch croaker, but I caught 4 of them, and then I said, "That's it. I'm out of here." So I picked up and moved. There was just so much bait, and there were croaker underneath. So
Was there any size of the croakers?
no.
No.
There was absolutely no size to them. There was nothing to be proud of yesterday, Bob. There was
Oh my God.
there was nothing. And
I know.
it was
I expected this. I expected this text yesterday with all these fish pictures last night, and I never got it. So.
yeah, well, we still don't have a fish picture. Yeah, I did see a snake. A snake tried to board my my kayak. That was
Did he try and get on? Yeah.
well, I don't know. He just kind of popped up next to it, was kind of looking at me and startled me. He turned and went the other way. Yeah, it was,
I like when the turtles come up,
yeah, there were some turtles
because they don't know that you're there, and they pop up like right next to you, and they turn around and they're surprised, and they just take off.
Yeah, my favorite. I mean, the ospreys were going crazy. There was so much bait. They were just continuous, and it's amazing how many dives they make, and they always come up with something. I don't think I saw one miss all day, and they were all over. I mean, they were all over. I've never seen so many ospreys together, just kind of circling and just dive bombing. And the bald eagles were doing well too. So.
I was going to say, did you see any eagles?
I did. I didn't see any of them fishing, but I did. You know, they don't like when you get even within a quarter of a mile of them.
Yeah.
So as we're fishing these banks, all of a sudden you just see this huge thing take off, and you're like, oh, that's got to be an eagle. And then it turns and it just moves a quarter of a mile up and then as soon as you get up there, it loops around you and goes back down to where it was. But
it just goes to the next highest tree.
Yeah, those are amazing creatures to see out there. So it was a day of catching tiny fish and baking in the sun, watching a lot of bait, and seeing the wildlife. That's what it was for us yesterday.
Well, it could be a lot worse than that.
It could.
It's not a too bad a day.
I'm not complaining.
No.
And if it does sound like I'm complaining, please. People understand. I am not complaining about any day on the. Well, I shouldn't say any day. I've complained. I wasn't complaining about yesterday. It was good. Got to go out with my buddy Randy. Got to spend some time on the water and have a few laughs and catch a few fish. So we still caught fish. They just weren't the size fish that we had really wanted. So
yeah.
That's the way it goes. That's fishing. But I appreciate you coming on today, Bob. It's just making me want to follow you around more. I want to hear about your trip coming up down into Virginia, and obviously I'm not looking for the spots, but how you did down there. And when you get down to Crisfield, I'd like to tag along sometime and really see it. The Crisfield, I mean, full disclosure, that's one of the areas that my wife and I are looking at for relocating to. Mm-hmm. And that not necessarily in Crisfield, but there's, there are towns around it that look really interesting. But that is the type of water that I love and that you've talked about. I mean, the system of creeks and marshes and the shorelines in that area. And by the way, right near the deep shipping channels too. So, or the deeper channels there.
Yeah. And I tell you, I'm also active with CCA. And we just finished putting an artificial reef balls off of the southern end of Janes Island. That is probably about a mile to the south. I have the coordinates for it. I haven't gotten out there yet, but we really anticipate that being a really active place. We put hundreds and hundreds of concrete reef balls out there.
Really?
Build artificial reef. So we have that to look forward to also.
So right in the, what is it? was it Daughtry Creek or is it Doherty Creek?
Daugherty Creek's to the south. It would be in the Little Anamessex River.
Oh, okay. The little end.
So if you come off the point at the most southern edge of Jane's Island,
yep,
it's probably about a mile or so to the south, more or so out of the river.
Gotcha.
And then below that would be the Pocomoke River,
yep,
which is really the borderline between Maryland and Virginia. So you're right there.
Well, I'll tag along on that trip too.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to get used to, that's deeper water though, so you're gonna have to get the vertical jigging going in there.
Probably. Yeah, it's about 18 feet.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the border of when I'm casting and retrieving and vertical jigging.
Yeah.
You get spoiled when you flounder fish because you can flounder fish and vertical jig in 3 feet of water because they don't care. Yeah, a kayak can go right over a flounder. It honestly does not care. It's a whole different thing when you start talking, redfish will spook on anything. The trout, I think, are a little bit more brave, but they'll still spook off. So, yeah.
I know the stripers don't spook off of anything.
No, I mean, they'll come up and they'll eat right next to the boat and they don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you hook one, you get into the boat and there's 5 with him.
Yeah. Well, it's almost time to start focusing on the big ones. I mean, as we start transitioning into the fall, we're going to have in the Mid-Atlantic, and it's a little bit different in the Chesapeake as to when things kick off. But we're going to start looking, I think, in October is really when we're going to start looking at the striped bass and the larger ones coming through. So I'll have to start gearing up for that. When
that water starts to cool, they're going to start moving out of those creeks and gathering at the river mouths. Or the little creeks to the big creeks, from the big creeks to the rivers, and then out they go, and they'll be hanging, feeding up, probably all of October, really into November. For about 6 weeks, you should be able to find them.
Yeah, I can't wait. Well, and then Bob, we'll have to get you up into New Jersey and get you to some of the. I want to see you out in the Raritan Bay when it's really kicked off and we have the 50 pounders in 15 feet of water in the back part of the bay. I think I think I can probably persuade you to come up and fish with us for a day or two.
You're talking my language. I don't care how deep the water is.
Yeah. Well, it's a whole different thing up there. It's crazy. Northern New Jersey is, in my book, probably the best place to go if you want to get the large striped bass during the migration. So I'll talk to you about that. I'll convince you, I'm sure, to come up for a day or two, and we'll go out and hit those.
Won't take much.
Yeah. Well, Bob, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it. I love talking with you about fishing, and thanks for the information on the Chesapeake. I think, man, for so many people that go out there, you always hear people talking about Florida, and Texas, but I don't know why people don't talk more about the Chesapeake, because you literally have everything in the Chesapeake, and it just provides so many opportunities. And it's great to hear from somebody who is, I don't know if it's your life mission at this point, but it seems like it, to explore that entire area and figure it out from the fishing perspective. So I'll follow you anywhere, because there are only a couple of people that I know that really know the Chesapeake, and you're one of them. And your post.
I know an aspect of it. I'll put it that way.
Sure. Well, you can't know the whole thing.
No, it's way too much.
It's way too. It's too many different types of fishing styles, too many different species. But you're definitely dialed in on those coastlines, and that's where I like to go. So, thank you again for coming on. And everybody, we will be back next week with the next podcast. Till next time, get out there, get on the water, and get some tight lines.
Coast fishing, it's in my soul.